and will be also available through Facebook and the village website. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask Clerk Saladino to call the roll.
Trustee Augustine.
Here.
Trustee Gale.
Here.
Trustee McGee. Trustee O'Brien.
Here.
Trustee Peterson.
Here.
Trustee Thompson.
Here.
President Kugler.
Here, and Trustee McGee is traveling and unable to make tonight's meeting. I do believe we have a few gentlemen that just got off track or cross-country practice from St. Francis that can lead us in the pledge. So if those gentlemen could come on up to the microphone in the center. Introduce yourselves. Tell us what grade you're in at St. Francis, and hopefully your two friends. Are your two friends not joining? I thought we were going to have all three of you. Come on. We got the reluctant. Come on up. All you have to do is start out by saying your name and what grade you're in. If you want to say your teacher's name, you can.
I'm Zeno, and I'm in 7th grade.
I'm Leo, and I'm in 6th grade.
I'm Spiro, and I'm in 6th grade.
And I guess I should have said it. Ian, you're here as part of the Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts. Why don't you tell us your troop and where you're out of?
Troop 14.
And that's at the Methodist Church? Is that where you usually meet?
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Now, if you could start us with the pledge, and we'll all join in. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, boys. We have a action-packed meeting with a lot of nice announcements to make. First is the resolution recognizing the 80th anniversary of the LaGrange Pet Parade. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. I'm hoping that Mrs. Breen will come up into the microphone and talk a little bit about it and introduce everybody that's with her today. We do appreciate all that the Breens have done for the last 80 years. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the LaGrange Pet Parade. The parade's a time-honored tradition that provides an opportunity for the community to come together and celebrate LaGrange with family, friends from throughout the region. In honor of the Pet Parade and all that it has meant to LaGrange, the village has prepared a resolution, which I'm now going to read. Whereas on June 19th, 1947, the first LaGrange Pet Parade was organized and held in downtown LaGrange by the LaGrange Chamber of Commerce and then Chamber President Ed Breen. And whereas at the second year of the LaGrange Pet Parade, over 600 children participated along with companions such as cats, dogs, horses, chipmunks, and many others. Whereas the LaGrange Pet Parade quickly grew in popularity and by 1949 drew reported crowds of 15,000 spectators who came to enjoy this unique event. And whereas in 1952, it had grown to an estimated 30,000 spectators, which was covered by the national news outlets and featured celebrities from television and radio. And whereas the leadership of the LaGrange Pet Parade passed from its originator, Ed Breen, to his son, Bob Breen, in 1996. Bob, Ed, and other members of the committee oversaw the creation of the nonprofit Pet and Pals Charities in 1999 to ensure the parade's continuum. Whereas the Pets and Pals Ltd. Limited was renamed to the Pet Parade Charities in 2016. Whereas the LaGrange Pet Parade is made possible through the efforts of a dedicated board of local volunteers who contribute their time and expertise to ensure a successful event year after year. And whereas the LaGrange Pet Parade is a signature event of LaGrange, which continues to be a source of pride to the whole area. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the President of the Board of Trustees of the Village of LaGrange, Cook County, State of Illinois, that the Village of LaGrange recognizes the LaGrange Pet Parade on their 80th anniversary and expresses gratitude for the positive contributions that the parade has made to the community. And we don't need to vote on that, but we're going to invite Mrs. Breen, if you want, to the microphone. And then I hope that we're going to have all the people that came with you gather around and we'll take some pictures to celebrate this fun event.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bob was in the first parade in 1947 because his parents made him, not because he wanted to be.
Let's not talk age either.
Okay. It's been our privilege to carry this forward. As you may or may not know, we're retiring and turning it over to, I think, is a wonderful committee that will carry it forward. I have to thank the village for their support for 80 years. It's been incredible. I'm going to get a little choked up. I want to thank the police department for all of they do to protect all of the people and the people watching it and the people putting it on, the fire department as well, and the hundreds of volunteers over the years that have made it possible. I won't be here, but I hope that there's a 100th resolution and a 100th celebration because it's a wonderful, wonderful family event for the community. And I thank you for the privilege of serving, as does Bob.
Yes, thank you so much.
So,
Well, thank you, and please stand there. We are going to do a roll call vote so that all the trustees can show their support for the pep parade, and then we're going to ask you guys to come forward, and we're going to come forward for some pictures. So with that, I'd ask Clerk Saladino first to call a roll call vote.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
And that obviously passes unanimously, so why don't we join in the front of the dais for a picture, and we do have the proclamation. Exactly. Next up is another proclamation, and that's establishing April 24th, 2026 as Arbor Day in the village of Grange. On the 24th, we'll celebrate Arbor Day, an occasion where we recognize and share our appreciation of trees. In recognition of this occasion, the village has prepared a proclamation, which I'll also read. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas the village of Grange is characterized by its stately and tree-lined streets, and whereas the village makes a continued effort to preserve the aesthetic beauty and environmental benefit of its tree canopy by appropriate urban forestry planning and reforestation. And whereas the forestry and tree planting program will continue to be an integral part of the services of the village of Grange provides to its residents, businesses, and schools. And whereas the Village of LaGrange recognizes the interest in and desire for a healthy urban forest from the entire community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village of LaGrange does hereby proclaim Friday, April 24th as Arbor Day, and therefore be it further resolved that Arbor Day shall be marked with an Arbor Day tree planting ceremony on Friday, April 24th, 2026 at Lyons Township High School, and shall serve to recognize its students' efforts to improve the village's urban forest. I'd like to welcome everybody to come out to LT North on the 24th at 9 a.m. for tree planting. It's always a fun event. This will be my 6th year doing it, and the first 5 were at various grade schools. So this will be a little different at the high school. I usually play some trivia games and things. I'm not sure how that will go over well with the high school students, but we'll see. Hopefully we get a few that are interested in biology or farming or something like tree care, which would be great. So I'm looking forward to it. Please join me April 24th at 9 a.m. And I don't think we need a vote on that one, but everybody I know supports Arbor Day. Moving on, we have the spring cleanup. It'll take place when Flood Brother customers, first, what it is, spring cleanup is when customers of LaGrange, or residents of LaGrange that have Flood Brothers as their disposal service, they can get rid of their items on their regular garbage day. If you'd like to participate, please make sure you have a separate spring cleaning up sticker, which are available at the same locations where refuse and yard waste stickers are purchased. There's more information on our village website. We do ask that the people try to put on your sticker the morning of when the garbage men will come. A lot of times people will put out their treasures starting on Saturday for the Monday pickup. And your things are taken by other people. And if your sticker's already on there, then the sticker's taken. Your other treasures that aren't taken are left behind, and Flood Brothers doesn't want to take them. So again, if you would put on the sticker the morning of, it's helpful. And again, on our webpage, talks about what's allowed and what's prohibited. So we look forward to that. This week is National Public Safety Telecommunication Week. As always, but during this week in particular, we express our gratitude and appreciation to the telecommunicators and all the public safety professionals for providing these vital public safety services to our community. We're part of LTAC, along with Countryside, Western Springs, and LaGrange Park. It's currently hosted in LaGrange, and we appreciate all the work, a lot of times referred to as 911 operators. Our telecommunication professionals do a fine job, a great job, and we appreciate their efforts. We are at the annual time for board and commissions. People coming on and coming off board of commissions, and we really appreciate their services. The work of the village really relies on volunteers that provide their time to serve fellow residents. It includes the village board and various boards and commissions that serve to fulfill various needs of our local government. While the village board works to develop a group to review the housing in LaGrange, whether it be a housing task force or a commission or whatever the name is, still under development, we are seeking residents to serve on that group and to participate in the various discussions. Residents who wish to serve the community on a housing group or any other commission or board, please volunteer for that. The easiest way to volunteer is to send a short email, letter, resume, something to say that you're interested in it to either myself or Village Manager Knight. You can send it also to any of the trustees and ask them to forward it, and they're always able to do that also. As the process considering appointments and reappointments is ongoing, again, I encourage everybody to submit if they have interest. And as always, I'd like to share my gratitude, and I know all the board joins me in that, to all the board and commission members for their dedication in serving the community. And Earth Day, moving on, is on April 22nd. I'd like to take the opportunity to wish everybody a happy Earth Day, which celebrates its 56th anniversary this year. And there are many ways to care for the planet in LaGrange. You can also, by caring the planet, you care for LaGrange and vice versa. And I encourage you to visit the village's website for a list of actions that have been developed by the village's Environmental Quality Commission. Moving on, it's springtime, and annually we do hydrant flushing. And it's already started and will continue through the end of May. The purpose of hydrant flushing is to purge sediment which is accumulated on the bottom of the water mains and to exercise the valves to ensure their proper operation. Signs will be posted on streets notifying residents where crews will be working in advance of the flushing activities. Immediately following the flushing of your nearest hydrant, run your cold water for several minutes to draw in clean water prior to doing laundry or any other type of activities. For more information regarding the hydrant flushing and water quality, please visit our website. And again, as we've had some storms, and we get further into spring, a friendly reminder that the village does have a backup prevention program aimed at assisting residents with protecting their homes from the impacts of flooding. For those that have not yet reviewed the program, we urge you to take a moment to look at the program criteria to determine if you qualify for the benefit and financial support of either a backflow preventer or overhead sewer. It's generally designed to pay for approximately 50% of the costs. And we're not going to be able to offer it indefinitely. We really urge residents to take advantage while it's available. And lastly, on a personal note, I was able to join a couple of weeks ago, 2 Mondays ago, fellow mayors that are members of the Illinois Municipal League in Rome for a private meeting with Pope Leo. And my wife and I were able to introduce ourselves, and I was able to say that I was the village president of LaGrange. He had spoken to all of the mayors and village presidents and really talked about service and how important it is to be of service and really to service the most vulnerable, the poor. And I was able to, when I had my private meeting with the Pope, to talk about all the good things that LaGrange does. On behalf of some of the less fortunate, I specifically mentioned the food pantries at St. Francis and St. Cletus, and he did give his blessings to everyone in LaGrange. And so with that, I'd ask Manager Knight for a manager's report.
There is. Thank you, President Kukler, and good evening, everyone. Later on tonight's agenda, we have the upcoming fiscal year budget for Village Board consideration. The proposed budget has been well considered, providing for adequate operating funds and resources for continued advancement of village services and funds to pursue ambitious capital projects. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank all of those that contributed to the development of the budget, which includes the Village Board, our consultant finance director, staff, and our residents. Spring is in the air, and of course, we are in the middle of spring-oriented public works services, which have started up recently. This includes the village's monthly brush pickup program, which continues through the month of November. As a reminder, those pickups begin at 7 a.m. the first Monday of the month, and branches need to be at least less than 8 feet long and smaller than 8 inches in diameter. To participate, please ensure that the brush is placed in the parkway for removal on the Sunday prior to the week of pickup. In addition, crews have been out marking areas for spring tree planting, conducting hydrant flushing, and performing catch basin cleaning to ensure that sewer systems perform optimally during the spring storm season. President Kukler, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Manager Knight. And I'd just like to emphasize brush pickup is not leaf pickup. And we do take brush pickup in the spring, but we do not take leaves. Do not rake your leaves into the street. It just clogs up the catch basins. It adds to flooding. It causes problems. So again, brush pickup is ongoing. More details on the webpage. Leaf pickup will not commence again until the fall. With that, I'd request Clerk Saladino read the items on the consent agenda, followed by those appearing under current business.
Matters on the consent agenda will be considered by a single motion and vote because they already have been considered fully by the board at a previous meeting or have been determined to be of a routine nature. Any member of the Board of Trustees may request that an item be moved from the consent agenda to current business for separate consideration. Item A, a resolution requesting closure of LaGrange Road for 47th Street to Burlington Avenue for the annual pet parade. Item B, minutes of the Village of LaGrange Board of Trustees regular meeting March 9th, 2026. And item C, April 13th, 2026, consolidated voucher. Under current business, this agenda item includes consideration of matters being presented to the Board of Trustees for action. Item A, a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2026-2027 operating and capital improvement budget. Item B, an ordinance approving a variation for the LaGrange zoning code for minimum interior side yard at 317 7th Avenue. Item C, a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Parvin Klaus Sign Company, Inc. for downtown parking signs. And item D, Build Illinois Initiative, related state legislation, and a resolution of the Village of LaGrange in support of Municipal Housing Authority.
Thank you, Clerk Saladino. Next on tonight's agenda is public comments regarding agenda items. Individuals are reminded to conclude their statements within 3 minutes. And I'd ask if anyone has any comments on tonight's agenda to please approach the microphone.
Good evening, President Kukler, members of the board and staff. My name is Peg Moster. I'm a resident of LaGrange and co-chair of the Housing Task Force of the League of Women Voters of the LaGrange area. I'm speaking to item 6D on tonight's agenda, specifically to attachment 2, a resolution of the Village of LaGrange in support of Municipal Housing Authority. And this question may be more in line with Attorney Schuster. I understand you may be making a presentation on the bill program, and this kind of falls into it. And what I want to really understand is what exactly is the resolution intended to accomplish? Is it, as its intent seems to be, a means to forestall or prevent LaGrange from whatever comes out of the bill legislation now working its way through the House and Senate in Springfield? Does state law not supersede local law? As I think you've heard from speakers at prior meetings, the bill legislation, according to several polls, has growing support statewide and was suggested to address the nationally recognized lack of affordable housing for middle-income individuals and families. It has also been recognized that local zoning laws and ordinances were not intended to be restrictive from the beginning, but over time have become so. To that end, we believe that the Housing Task Force proposal presented at the March 23rd board meeting would assist the village to plan for a future under a potential state-driven rule on zoning should it pass and be enacted into law. And I was very happy to hear you mention tonight, President Kukler, that it sounds as though you may be in favor of a housing task force when you invite people to join it. Please consider that before voting to authorize the resolution before you, I would like to think that LaGrange can be visionary. Rather than taking a kitty bar the door, the redcoats are coming, anti-bill position that we may have to live with in the future. Thank you, and also congratulations on your visit with Pope Leo. I'm very envious.
Thank you. And I will address a couple of those things. Yes, I'm supportive of the resident group and hoping that residents will volunteer their time. As far as the resolution that's part of D, the resolution was drafted by the Illinois Municipal League. The Illinois Municipal League, as well as the West Central Municipal Conference, has come out strongly against the build bill in that it's taking the power, zoning power, away from communities, municipalities, and putting it into Springfield's hands. And that's what's there. I believe that LaGrange should make the zoning rules. Whatever those are that are appropriate should be made by the board versus one set of zoning rules made by Springfield. So if the board decides to look at the resolution, it would be to send a signal to our state reps and senators, as well as the governor, that the board of LaGrange does not want to give up zoning powers to the state of Illinois. But it's not to forestall it. And yes, if the bill passes, we will be like many bills that pass in Springfield. We will be left with the, dealing with it, the consequences, the unfunded mandates, and all the rest that go with any legislation that Springfield passes. And so that's what we'll be discussing.
Thank you for your explanation.
Yep.
Kurt Volkman, Chairperson of the Design Review Commission in LaGrange. Appreciate the explanation of what that resolution that you had posted was about. I have grave concerns about it. You spoke of with your time with Pope Leo and talking about service. Service to those less fortunate also includes housing. And when the way the resolution is written for the LaGrange Municipal Housing Authority, it's well-intentioned, and I understand where you're coming from, but it also basically flips the bird at the state. And we can't afford that as residents. We have future stormwater projects coming. We need state support for those. And you basically put us at risk of falling down the chain in terms of priority. So I'd ask you to think, wider than just housing alone, because stormwater is a real issue, affordability is a real issue. There's 9 to 10 closed retail facilities in our downtown that need foot traffic. Our schools are declining in population. And the build legislation, if it's enacted, and it's going to be enacted in process, it's not going to be enacted all at once. And it's patterned after the 2040 plan that's in Minneapolis right now. Minneapolis has not seen an increase in crime or traffic, has seen no changes to the property values of housing, and they've seen a modest increase in affordable housing for seniors and young families near transit locations. So, and there's also, basically moving through, obviously, the state, but it's also moving through the federal government. So if we want to really buck the system and basically tell the state, go away, then you're putting stormwater at risk, and you're putting all affordability at risk of our community. And you're doing that to our citizens. And I think you have to be cognizant of that fact. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jonathan Robinson, and I'm a resident. I'm here tonight to address some persistent discrepancies in the proposed budget, specifically regarding personnel expenses and fund allocations. This investigation began with a simple observation. The parking fund listed only 3 full-time employees, yet personnel for expenses for that fund were roughly $900,000. Naturally, these raised questions about hidden payroll. At the time, I assumed the budget would eventually clarify which employees from other departments were being subsidized by which funds. But then I couldn't find that information in the document, so I planned to ask the question at the budget workshop. I wanted to personally thank Trustee Augustine and Trustee Thompson for echoing those concerns during the budget workshop. It was encouraging to hear the leadership demand that same clarity I was looking for. However, I am profoundly disappointed to see that despite that request made by actual trustees, that level of detail was not integrated into the budget presented at the last meeting's budget hearing. It's a disservice to this board, the public, and to the public when the directives for transparency are ignored. In this final version of today's agenda, we do have a matrix on page 65 that appears to be showing the fund distribution for personnel. But as I dug deeper, it seems to raise more questions than it answered, and the math simply stopped working. The page 65 matrix appears to indicate a total of $17.1 million taking out of various funds for personnel. Yet page 27, which summarizes personnel expenses across all departments' budgets, listed the total at only 16.8, which I verified it myself by adding up all the totals from the actual funds in various departments. There's a $300,000 gap between what is being taken out of the funds and what's being credited to the actual department budgets for personnel. We're right back where we started, a hidden payroll situation. Before you move to a final vote tonight, I kindly request that this board require a formal explanation from the village staff on what is shown on page 65 in that matrix and where that 300,000 discrepancy is going. Is it if it's leaving the funds but not appearing in the department budgets, we have a significant accounting transparency issue that should be resolved before this budget earns your approval. I would also like to quickly touch on agenda item 6D about denouncing the build proposal, which is the state's statewide affordable housing proposal. For the 112 Burlington and Jackson Square project, over 20 times people mentioned parking in the formal October hearing. The neighbors of that building had many concerns about making parking worse and people parking in front of our homes, but no one cared. It's upsetting to hear the village president at the last meeting state how much he hates the idea of people parking in front of his home due to the potential development. And now to see the same village that would not follow their own requirements when it came to the multifamily building next to my property so adamantly oppose the idea of multifamily development anywhere near their homes because of the effect it might have on their personal property. I don't know how many times I asked this board to put themselves in my shoes, and if it wasn't reasonable at their house, why should it be reasonable at mine? The hypocrisy of seeing the same board looking to vote tonight to tell the state not to bother the village's zoning codes because multifamily buildings could be near their own homes and could affect them specifically would be unbelievable. The optics of you having a meeting about Affordable Housing Task Force last meeting and not bringing it forward to this meeting, but instead bringing up this 6D agenda item to say the state's requirements for affordable housing are wrong has the most ridiculously poor optics you could ever put in front of this village.
Thank you. Seeing no other commentators, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda and a second?
I move for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
Yes, President Kukler, as previously stated, I recuse myself from voting on any agenda items related to the village prosecutor.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments on the consent agenda, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee Peterson. Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Moving on to current business. Under A, we have a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2026 and 27 operating capital improvement budget, and that's referred to Trustee Augustine.
Yes, thank you, President Kukler. Before I begin to read out this summary on the budget tonight, I would like to ask, I guess, our village manager, Jack Knight, if you could help clear up some of the things that were raised by Mr. Robinson regarding personnel and just help us understand that, if you wouldn't mind. I know Anne-Marie's not here, but hopefully we can address that.
Yeah, and perhaps we could follow up with her to get a little bit more detail on that. I did try to follow some of the things that were shared. There are, on page 65, we do have a number regarding the total expenditures by fund type. I presume, having not looked at this very thoroughly, that this is an accounting perspective in terms of general fund versus the enterprise and other funds within the village. So we could certainly work to resolve that, and if we need to get an answer to Mr. Robinson, we certainly can.
Okay, so we could, this week, early, hopefully, get an answer from her and share that out for clarity. It doesn't have any other damaging effect to move forward with that unknown. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks again to all who continue to come out week after week, year after year, to share their thoughts on all things that we are doing up here and out there. To those who specifically give input, valuable input on all of our processes, certainly our budget, how we spend, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. We take that input very seriously, and I appreciate it. I also like to thank Jack and Anne Marie. This has been hard work. It's been an unusual year for the village, but you've gotten us across the finish line, and we're gonna get everything back to a much better place in the next year with our new services. So the village's annual operating and capital improvement budget for the fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2026 sets forth a plan for expenditures and revenues anticipated for the upcoming budget year. Budget meetings were held over the past 6 months in development of the proposed fiscal year 2026-27 budget. The budgeting process began in December with the public hearing on the preliminary property tax levy and adoption of the final 25 property tax levy. We continue with workshops to discuss capital projects in February and operating budgets in March. A public hearing was held as part of the village board meeting on March 23rd, 2026, to provide an opportunity for members of the public to comment on the budget. Throughout the process, changes supported by the village board and suggested by members of the public have been incorporated into the refined proposed budget. The general fund, which is the village's main operating budget, reflects an estimated expenditure of just over $20 million in the upcoming fiscal year. Based upon the revenue and expenditure projections appearing in the village's operating and capital budget plan, the general fund reserves balance projection, the general reserve fund balance projection is $21.7 million, or 94.5% of annual operating expenditures, superseding the village's fund balance policy of having 50 to 75% of annual operating expenditures in reserve. Capital improvements, particularly in flood mitigation, remain a significant priority and are reflected in the proposed budget. In total, there are $25,652,359 in capital expenditures accounted for, with just under $16 million of those expenditures directed at flood mitigation efforts. The budget also includes $80,000 for a financial consultant to assist in developing financial options for over $121 million of capital infrastructure projects identified in the infrastructure capital plan. Long-term financial impacts of the financing options that balance operational needs and financial sustainability will be evaluated as part of that effort, with the goal of efficiently and effectively financing critical infrastructure projects while sustaining the village's financial health. The proposed general fund budget also includes a continued commitment of $2.5 million in capital funding annually and a fiscal year 26-27 transfer to the equipment replacement fund in the amount of $350,000 for the replacement of various vehicles and equipment. So our budget approval and of the proposed resolution will adopt the proposed operating and capital improvement budgets for the fiscal year of 2026-2027. Our staff and I recommend, and I would make a motion to approve the proposed resolution adopting the fiscal year 2026-2027 operating and capital improvements budget.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Peterson. Comments on that, if anyone? Seeing none, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Moving on to B, an ordinance approving a variation from the Grange zoning code for minimum interior side lot at 317 7th Avenue, and that's referred to Trustee Peterson.
Melissa Shields, the applicant, is the owner of the property at 317 7th Avenue, the subject property. The applicant applied for a variation from zoning code section 3-1103.3, minimum interior side yard for single-family residential districts to expand the existing principal structure at the subject property. On March 19th, 2026, the Zoning Board of Approval held a public hearing on the application. The subject property, as proposed, will be one zoning lot comprised of two lots of record, Lot 21 and Lot 22. Currently, 317 7th Avenue is two lots of record functioning as two zoning lots. Each lot has a width of 50 feet. While the two lots are under common ownership, only Lot 22 is improved. The applicant is proposing to expand the existing principal structure onto Lot 21. When Lot 21 is improved, the two lots of record will consolidate into one 100-foot wide zoning lot. Per zoning code section 3-110C3, the required interior side yard for 100-foot wide lot is 10 feet. The existing home has a 7.18-foot interior side yard along the northern property line. While the principal structure is expanding south, not north, the proposed consolidation of the two zoning lots will result in the existing home encroaching 2.82 feet into the new 10-foot required northern interior side yard. The ZBA found that the variation would not impact the essential character of the surrounding residential area and noted similar properties on the block. The ZBA also found that there is no other reasonable remedy for the requested relief. After the hearing was closed, the ZBA deliberated and voted 6-0 to recommend approval of the requested variation. Staff and the village attorney have prepared the ordinance, and I move to approve the variation.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Peterson and Trustee O'Brien. With that, any discussion on item B? Seeing none, I'd ask for a roll call vote. Sorry?
Just to clarify with the motion is move to approve the ordinance, not just the variation, correct?
Correct. My mistake.
Thank you, Attorney Schuster. Again, no discussion, and I would ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee Thompson.
Aye.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien.
Aye.
Trustee Peterson.
Aye.
And that item passes unanimously. Good luck to the homeowner. Next up is item C, a resolution approving a professional service agreement with Parvin Kloss Sign Company for downtown parking signs. It was originally referred to Trustee McGee. In her absence, I will introduce it and ask for a motion in a second. The recent parking study identified 10 short-term implementation steps to facilitate more efficient use of the village's existing parking inventory, prioritizing the most convenient areas for customer parking while continuing to serve the parking needs of employees, residents, and commuters. The village has implemented several of these recommendations, such as introducing license plate reader enforcement technology and expanding online processes for parking permits. Building on these accomplishments, the next step is to implement the parking study recommendations are to update the regulatory signs in the village's surface lots and garage. The updates will improve sign consistency across lots, clarify parking regulations, extend hours for time-limited parking till 8 p.m., which was recommended by the parking study. The primary audience for on-site signage will be the customer or infrequent visitor. Permit holders, such as commuters, employees, and residents, will use other channels of communication like the village's permit purchasing portal as a primary means of communication for rules applicable to their permit type. Extensive efforts were required to inventory existing signs and to develop a standardized design specifications for the new signs as a prerequisite to develop estimated quantities and costs for the needed signs. Staff reached out to numerous urban design and sign fabrication companies, with Parvin Kloss being the sole respondent with interest and availability. An interdepartmental team of staff have worked in an iterative process with Parvin Kloss Sign Company over the past several months to develop sign designs and specifications to accomplish the recommendations of the parking study. The proposed resolution would waive competitive bidding requirements and authorize entering into the attached contract for fabrication and installation of the downtown parking signage. And so with that, I would ask that there be approval of the resolution to enter into the contract with Parvin Kloss for downtown parking signs.
I'll approve and/or second, whatever this would be.
You'd be approving. You'd
All right,
be
I approve
motioning.
it. I'm
making
motioning
a
to
motion.
approve.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Gal. With that, any conversation, discussion on this? Trustee Augustine.
I do. Thank you, President Kugler. Trustee Thompson and I were at the most recent CEDC, the Community Economic Development Commission, great commission, by the way, if anyone's interested in joining, where we talked about signage. Charity Jones gave a great presentation on what we're doing, why we're doing it, and certainly we've been talking about it for a long, long time. And I was happy to see in here, a more finalized layout of the signs, and certainly it looks like some of the input from that commission meeting that night was taken in and added to it in terms of how to make certain parts of the sign pop out and message better against some of the other messages, because as we know here in LaGrange, signs sometimes have to contain multiple messages, not just no parking, but no parking students, or parking, public parking, but not, for this group, that group, decal. One I wanted to recommend, or at least comment on, was it exists in a couple of places, and if it can still be changed a bit, that would be great. Has to do with, it's on page 65. So we have page 65 of the document, where we have Brainerd and Burlington lot. The sign is just black and white. It says permit parking only 2 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then below that, same size font, no real separation. It says no student or school parking anytime. And I'm just wondering if there can be a line, or if that one can be offset, so that when they're looking at the sign, they feel like they're seeing two messages similar to what we have done in the decal parking. That was also a recommendation of the commission on several pages up, which is in the calendar lot. So we have CBD parking only kind of bolded out, and then below it the message. So I'm just worried that one of those two messages don't stand out. And similarly, lot 12, we have 3 messages: public parking daily from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., weekends 6 a.m. to 2 a.m., and all other times by permit only. Can that? They're all the same weight font, and I'm a little bit of a stickler on this, but I'm just wondering if there's any kind of design or thought that our vendor has for us to try to separate those out a little bit, using some simple sign constructs. But otherwise, I thought they all looked really pretty good. Oh, and then on the Brainerd lot, the big P sign that's decorative and it stands tall. Again, right there, it's got the P and it says public parking after 11 a.m., but same size right below it, as if it's one sentence, no student parking. So just if there's a way to differentiate some of those contrasting messages so they each kind of stand out a little bit, great. If it can't be done, it can't be done. But those are my only comments, but I'm glad to see this moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Trustee Thompson.
And I guess my usual question on these, the CBD, the calendar court lot, the CBD parking in the middle, have we, now that we've gone to CBD permits, or they're no longer, they're virtual like everything else, is that signage going to be big enough to, because I never knew that existed, to avoid people going to eat lunch and getting ticketed because they're in a employee parking only? Are we going to do something more to address that area?
So we did revise the design of the signs to make the messaging stand out more after the CEDC discussion. We are limited in the number of existing poles to mount signs to, but they are double-sided, so they show up on both sides. I think we'll have to kind of get some of the signs installed and then evaluate and see if we're running into issues of visibility, or if there's additional measures that might need to be taken to make it more visible.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Thompson. Seeing no other trustee comments, I would ask for a roll call vote.
Trustee Thompson?
Aye.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien?
Aye.
Trustee Gale?
Aye.
Trustee Augustine?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Next up, and the final matter under current business is the talk about the Build Illinois initiative and the related state legislation, and perhaps a resolution of the Village of LaGrange in support of, it says support of municipal housing authority, and what that would mean is support of keeping that authority with LaGrange as opposed to having it moved to Springfield. During the state address held on February 18th, 2026, Governor Pritzker announced that the Build Up Illinois Developments Build initiative aimed at increasing housing supply and reducing the cost of housing for Illinois residents. Following the announcement, several legislative bills were introduced that included statewide zoning regulations, standardizing construction practices, and grants for housing and infrastructure construction. Organizations such as the Illinois Municipal League are monitoring the legislation, advising on the status of legislative bills, and are advocating on behalf of its member municipalities. The West Central Municipal Conference has issued a statement recognizing the importance of addressing housing affordability while urging a continued role in local government and land use planning. The IML, on behalf of the municipalities that are members, has drafted a model resolution in support of municipal land use planning. The model resolution has been adapted for LaGrange's consideration should the village board find it suitable in articulating the village's position on the matter. I'd like to invite Attorney Schuster to begin his presentation. And before he begins, I would just say again, this is not saying whether we are supportive of affordable housing or not. The issue is, do we believe LaGrange should make the decision about housing, or do we believe that as a board that the state down in Springfield should make the decision? And with that, I'd open it up to Attorney Ben Schuster.
All right, there we go. Good evening. This way standing up here, I can see you a lot better, which makes this a little easier. I know Manager Knight's working to get the PowerPoint up on the screen, but we thought it was important to address the build legislation, and as President Kukler pointed out in his statements, it's really multiple pieces of legislation that have been introduced, and it's uncommon for us to brief you on all the Springfield legislation. And if we did it all the time, of course, it'd be hard because there's so many bills. And some fall by the wayside, some get adopted in various forms. And it's hard to always pick out the ones that are really, always worth talking about. But this legislation, and the reason that we're talking about this tonight, the reason that our firm has provided the alerts, is because from a municipal perspective, the build legislation in its collective form would represent perhaps the largest change in state versus municipal government authority since the 1970 Constitution. So it has potentially large implications depending on if it gets adopted, how it gets adopted, and what form it takes. And so it's something that we've definitely been tracking. I also think, based on the topics that you all have been discussing with affordable housing, it is worth understanding because whatever we do in Springfield may have implications in terms of how you address those issues. So what is the build legislation? Well, it's really birthed out of the idea that in this country, that and there's different numbers depending on which experts you want to talk to, but approximately 4 million housing units of housing short. We have a supply problem in this country. We don't have enough housing, and that's one of the reasons that you see how home prices keep rising. And that includes in Illinois, where estimates are approximately about 140,000 units short, based on several experts. So we have housing challenges in Illinois. We have rising housing costs statewide, limited housing supply. Many would argue slow pace of new construction, and zoning and regulatory barriers that some may argue makes it difficult to have more housing. And so they're the goals. The goals, and this is laid out in part in the governor's State of the State address and by the legislators who put forth legislation, is really to increase housing production statewide. And it's to bring down construction costs, get rid of regulatory barriers, and expand varieties of housing across Illinois, all laudable goals. Improving housing affordability for working families is, in that idea of the missing middle and how to address those in the middle who need more housing. So I'm going to talk about what the legislation does, and really we're going to break this into several different categories. As you see on the screen, we're talking about ADUs, accessory dwelling units. There are parking reforms, building code changes, the missing middle housing issue, impact fee reform, and third-party plan review and inspection regulations. So let's start with the first, which is accessory dwelling units. And accessory dwelling units can take many forms. You see two examples that are up on the screen, let's call it a backyard cottage or above the garage type housing. But the idea is it's a second housing availability on a house. Principal house would be the main housing unit, but then separate and detached from that, you would have a second unit. And when I say detached, meaning it's not part of the same sharing common space of a kitchen and so forth, but detached in this, not necessarily broken off in another unit. It could be touching, it could be, a basement unit, it could be just a wing of a house that is cordoned off for a separate person or a separate family. So the legislation would establish a statewide framework to allow ADUs such as backyard cottages, basement apartments, garage apartments, as I mentioned. These are just illustrative types, and targeted increasing on the small scale housing supply. It would provide additional rental incomes, and that's part of the goal too, is to help families afford their single family homes by having some rental income from another unit. And then also to create affordable housing in existing neighborhoods. So what would the legislation do? It would require us to allow at least one ADU on any property that is zoned for single-family homes. So across the various zoning districts of the village, and we have many, any district in which we would have a single-family homes as a permitted use, we would have to allow, as of right, somebody to put in an ADU. We can impose general but not special bulk requirements in ADU. So for example, we have setbacks that apply on our properties. So if we have a setback regulation, it's not that the ADU would be exempt from it, but what communities would not be permitted to do under the current draft is adopt special setback regulations or special FAR regulations. I think with the idea to make sure that municipalities don't try to use those to prevent ADUs from coming into place. Now, if a house is already taking up all the buildable area and building to the setbacks, it's likely, at least as the way that the legislation is crafted now, that somebody may not be able to fit an ADU by building additional square footage. They could take what's in their property already, adding a unit, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to build bigger. But we'll see how the legislation comes out. One of the things it also provides for in the legislation is you can't require an ADU to be occupied by a family member. Some communities have put up regulations that state, for example, that you have to be the same family. So you have a child who's, recently graduated from college, they could stay on your property. An elderly parent or somebody else who's part of your family could stay in the ADU. But some communities say it can't be somebody unrelated to those who reside in the main principal structure. This legislation would prohibit those types of regulations. It also would prohibit impact fees. So additional units get built, you wouldn't be able to implement an impact fee saying for every new unit you create, you have to pay an impact fee that would go to, let's say, the village or the schools and park districts. that you usually have when you create new housing units. So it is not, it's a very common regulation across the state and municipalities that when you create a new housing unit, not only are you paying your property taxes, but often you make a capital contribution, is the idea, through an impact fee that gets divvied up amongst the various taxing bodies to allow them to expand their services to be able to take on additional population. You wouldn't be able to do that with an ADU. The legislation also provides that you don't have minimum and maximum bedroom sizes. So you couldn't say in an ADU, no bedrooms bigger than a certain size or smaller than a certain size. The second part of the legislation is parking reform. So right now, municipalities have broad latitude to create parking regulations. So when you create property, when you build up property, whether it's a home, whether it's a business, we have parking ratios that you have to have parking on site to meet certain ratios. So this would prohibit requiring more than 0.5 parking spaces per multifamily unit, and it would prohibit requiring more than one parking space for a single-family home. So it takes away authority to create our own ratios of what we may or may not think is appropriate, and it creates this parking, a kind of a uniform set statewide. It also says we can't impose parking requirements on conversions of non-residential uses to residential uses. So if you have a building that's commercial, has a parking lot pre-existing or whatnot, you can't implement additional requirements on them if they're going to take that commercial property and turn it into residential. And by the way, I should tell you that please, if you have any questions as I go, don't hesitate to ask. The third part of the legislation is some building code reform. So one of the criticisms of the modern day codes that many municipalities employ is that some say that it makes it more onerous to have more housing, both more units and it increases the cost for housing. So one of the ways that this tries to bring down cost and to have more units is you think about a multifamily building. Building codes in most situations require to having 2 sets of stairs if it's a multiple floor building, 2 sets of ingress egress points, so that way whether it be a fire or or all sorts of other life safety reasons, you have 2 sets of stairs. So up on the screen you have some diagrams, and don't worry about the height and the how it's drawn, but it focused more. You can see, on the left you have a building that has 2 stairwells. The idea is it says you only have to have one in many circumstances in a multifamily building. That we wouldn't be able to require 2 stairwells; you'd have one. And now there's conditions on that. It wouldn't be allowed for buildings that are more than 6 stories, but you can go up to 6 and have 1 set of stairs. As long as you don't have more than 4 units per floor, that you have sprinklers, in the stairwell, that you have smoke detectors and some other life safety measures. The biggest impact of the legislation is the next category, which is the idea of addressing the missing middle housing. This is a planning term that you see a lot that's really been talked about in all sorts of forms over the last many years, but the idea is to create more affordable housing. And when I say affordable, I don't just mean affordable, in terms of low income, but affordable for those who are in the middle. And it may be those who are on limited budgets because their seniors are retired, those who might be, just out of college and their income is not as high, so they're just trying to, find housing that they can afford. Part of it's diversity of housing. Again, the idea that we have family units that range in size from quite large to those that are just an individual, and finding places, in that missing middle, because, the idea is we don't have enough of that housing. So this would increase housing options between the single-family homes and the large apartment buildings by trying to encourage various categories, whether they be duplexes, townhomes, triplexes, 4 flats. I don't know if there's a term for quad flats, but I'll stop. Sorry, Charity? Quadruplex. small apartments in cottage clusters. Cottage cluster, and I'll give you some examples. I'll put up some pictures so you can see, but basically the idea is one lot, multiple homes built in, around common areas that they kind of all share a lot, but they're all on the same property. So in the legislation, it says that we must have at least one residential zoning district that allows single-family detached dwellings on lots of not more than 2,500 square feet. So the idea is smaller lots, that we have to have a place in the village, one zoning district, that would allow much smaller lots than we often are accustomed to. In suburbs like Grange, we have lots based on historical size that are not huge, but we don't have a lot of lots that are under 2,500 square feet and that are for single-family homes in residential zoning districts. Also, the legislation says we can't require single-family detached lots to be more than 2,500 square feet in any zoning district where single-family detached dwelling units are allowed. Meaning the idea is some communities put up large barriers. You can't have a lot for the single-family home that's less than 1 acre. So you have communities that have that, and so it's much more pastoral. So this would be that you have much more freedom to have a home on a smaller lot.
Attorney Schuster, we probably don't have the 1 acre lot in LaGrange that you're referring to.
Correct.
But we might have a 5,000 square foot lot. Mm-hmm. And this would allow that 5,000 square foot lot to be subdivided into two 25 square foot lots.
Right. And I was about to say, my next point was going to be you could end up with a situation where you have more subdivisions of lots, larger lots broken into a couple lots because it becomes more economical to do that and sell off a piece to build a second home. So for the next slide, I just pulled up a listing that is in LaGrange, just to give you some ideas as you think about its impacts and what this may or may not do. So here's a lot, a little over 19,000 square feet. You can see the price, a little over 700,000. We have lots that are smaller, also currently listed 4,000 square feet. So what does the legislation do? It says we must allow up to 8 unit developments as of right in all residential zoning districts, depending on the size of the lot. And you see a chart that I have up here, the number of units permitted. So if it's a lot that's really small, less than 2,500 square feet, we are allowed to say you can only have 1 unit. But as the lot size gets bigger, people, as of right, would be allowed to put more than a single-family home on a lot. So for that lot that's 2,500 square feet to 5,000, you could have 4 units. 5,000 to 7,500, you could have up to 6, and if it's over 7,500 square feet for the lot, you can have up to 8 units. So going back for a second, so this lot, we talked about 4,000 square feet. They would be allowed to put up to 4 units on that lot if they can do it within the various bulk requirements. Or if you go to this lot with 19,000 square feet, you could theoretically put up to 8 units on a lot. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen on every lot, and I'm not saying it's going to happen on these lots. Every lot you'll have to do an analysis and figure out, if you're selling, what's your best offer. And a developer is going to have to figure out what they can do and what they can make work, and is it worth flipping a home. But what I think you can say is that this changes the economics in terms of tear downs and conversions, at least in some instances.
Would you be allowed to subdivide that 19,000 square foot lot into 2 lots?
Yes.
And then you would be able to put 16 units on the 2 lots, 8 on each.
Depending on, right, you'd have to figure out the bulk requirements and you'd have to figure out how that plays out, but it's a theoretical possibility. So we talked about the various types of housing. Here's an example of a duplex where you can take a lot and you would be able to put 2 units on it. We have another example here of kind of like what you could do with like a quadplex with 4, or this, which is a property in LaGrange with I believe 6 units in it. So you can find ways to utilize lots in a very different manner and not just for single-family homes. Another example is something like this, which is called a courtyard type building, and the legislation contemplates these. This is where you have buildings that are built around, in multiple units built around a courtyard. You can all put them on a single lot, or the cottage cluster where you have multiple cottages that could be built on a lot where they're all kind of together but separate units.
Ben, question on those multi-units. If someone were to do that, currently we don't have design standards for homes in single-family districts, but if this were happening in a previously single-family district, but they're putting up multi-units, are there any design standards that could be applied as there would be within a land development that comes into town?
Yeah, we'll have to see how the legislation plays out, but I believe you would not be able to start implementing all sorts of design standards. And one of the things with this legislation, at least as it's being debated and talked about, and the way this was crafted, is the idea that they recognize there have been municipalities who put up roadblocks that make it more difficult, even when you allow, perhaps as of right or as a special use, multifamily. They do it through bulk regulations. You could do it through design regulations. You could do all sorts of things. So the idea is to really take away municipal authority and to have more of a uniform state rule. So I don't know how it's going to end with where it comes out on what we can do for design, but we'll have to watch that.
And I think there's some differing language, as Ben mentioned. There's various different pieces of legislation, and there's differing language relative to design. I believe one of them says, similar to the ADUs, you can't have standards that only apply to multifamily, but if you have design standards that commonly apply, those could be administered. I believe that's in one of the bills.
Yeah.
I want to go back to ADUs for a moment.
Sure.
I did not hear, is there any restriction on the number of people that can live in the ADUs?
So the answer, there are, but not through the legislation. It would be typically governed through the fire code and the building code. So we have rules under our fire code of just how many occupants you can have and so forth. And the same would be applied to your single-family home as well. If you had 38 people, even if you're all related, there may be issues if you have one bedroom from a fire and health safety perspective, but it's fairly liberal. So to think of an ADU is, and also remember with the ADUs, it doesn't regulate a maximum size. So can't tell you, it could be a very small ADU that practically, so I'll go back for a second. So above the garage or in the backyard where it's a small unit, small property, and you may only be able to fit one or two people in there practically. With a bigger lot, though, you could build a much bigger ADU, and you could theoretically have, a much larger family unit living there.
That's what I'm wondering about, is if that would, in fact, put additional stress on a school and public safety.
Well, so one of the questions, and this is one that we'll have to see if the legislation gets adopted and how it plays out, is depending on how many ADUs are built or how many homes are torn down and then converted to multifamily, it then becomes a question of, if you have a large increase in population, it may increase demand on schools, parks, districts, libraries. It could have impacts on municipal services in terms of needed, improvements to water mains and sewers and so forth if you have a lot more people living on a block. But I think it's going to be very lot specific on what makes sense in terms of the economics of maintaining a single family home versus when it hits the market, does it make sense for somebody to buy to flip and tear down and turn it into a 4-flat? And and that's how it plays out in LaGrange. Will be, we can speculate, but it's speculation.
And one more thing, in terms of the flooding impact, so now we have less permeable ground space in some of these yards, and currently we would ask for someone putting even a small addition onto a house to, bury some of the water that's displaced in a tank underground. So I'm wondering, will we have any allowance on or say in how that goes, because, unlike some communities, we have a bit more of a flooding issue than others.
So the legislation does not speak to stormwater in and of itself. So we have our normal building codes that we would apply. And
Yes, our stormwater management requirements apply based on impervious area that's being added to the lot. It doesn't care if it's a patio or a pool or a garage or a house or an ADU. So I would think, based on what we've seen in the legislation, that would be unimpacted.
But Ben, I had a question. So the things like our lot coverage and building coverage, are those still something we would be allowed to control, or would that no longer be in our control?
We're about to get to the next slide, and it depends what you do or not do that will get to really the setback issue. But I will say it depends. So like the ADU issue, you would not have authority to adopt special rules that apply to ADUs in terms of those bulk requirements. So you would not be able to say, for example, if you have a setback, that requirement of 10 feet, you wouldn't be able to say, but if it's an ADU, it's going to be 25 feet. You couldn't adopt a specific ADU setback rule, but you do have your normal bulk rules. But let me finish the question, because it brings me to my next slide, which is, what if we don't change our zoning code? Because the legislation says we have 8 months after the effective date of the legislation to do it. And if we just were not to do it, that creates, the legislation tells us what happens, which is our rules will then fall by the wayside, and we would then enter a situation where there's default rules that enter in. So if that were to occur, if we didn't allow everything I just said, then what we would have is our maximum setbacks could not exceed 10 feet from the front or the back, the front yard or the backyard, 5 feet on the side. So think of all the front yards and backyards that we have now, those would be widely wiped out. You can't impose maximum height restrictions of less than 35 feet if we don't allow everything that's been talked about. And then also we would have to allow a lot coverage of at least 70%, which is a sizable part of lot coverage. So there's incentives to adopt everything that the state is mandating. So the fifth part of the legislation is impact mitigation fees. So as I mentioned earlier, it is very common for municipalities to be able to impose impact fees. You want to take a property and subdivide it and put 3 homes on it, you have to pay impact fees for creating new homes. You do a new subdivision, you're going to pay an impact fee, and those are capital contributions that usually go to the school districts, the park district, libraries, the village, and so forth. So what this legislation would do is we would still be allowed to charge impact fees, but only in accordance with a single formula that's created by the state. Impact fees generally are studied periodically by municipalities to try to approximate the costs of what it is to add a student to the school, for example. And you come up with a number, and that may vary differently in various places. So it might be more expensive to add classroom space in a built-out community than it is a rural community. But this would instead create one formula for the state. It would also prohibit land dedication requirements that are not currently adopted and require cash alternatives instead. We don't do this a lot because we're fairly built out, but in many communities, if you're going to build like a large subdivision, you have to dedicate a certain amount of acreage to the municipality to use for various services. This would change that practice. The last part of the legislation that I was going to hit on this evening is the plan review and inspection rules. So, as I'm sure Charity can tell you, her department at different times of the year, depending on how many permit applications come in, the workload varies. And here in LaGrange, I know the village prides itself on trying to be as responsive as possible, when somebody turns in building plans, to review them, to have the fire department, engineering, all the various departments review them, provide comments back. Oftentimes, when we get plan sets, there are issues. They are not compliant with code, and we have to go back and forth many times with builders to get them right. And it's really a service that we provide to the residents, not only the person who is maybe buying a home and wants to make sure and may not know enough to do their own inspections, but we want to make sure that the home they're getting is built to code, it's safe, it's going to be reliable, and the next owner 20 years from now that it's going to, be that way. And so there's a lot of effort that goes in. And when you have multiple developments all at the same time, it's the height of the season, it can take a little longer sometimes to go through the process. One of the complaints, though, about municipalities is there are some who are very delinquent and are much slower than we are. This would create a set of rules of how quickly we have to review plans. So we would have 15 business days for a single family or two family home upon first submission to review it and provide comments back. 30 days if it's a multifamily mixed use or a commercial project. And again, this would apply whether it's a skyscraper or whether it was, a single, family home. There's these rules, and you can understand the complexity of some properties. That is very hard to do, particularly if the plans are not always in great form. If we have to send them back to the property owner, they would, and when we get them back as a second set, we'd only have 10 business days for subsequent reviews. And if we don't meet those deadlines, it would allow a builder, an architect, to go out, hire their own plan reviewer privately to certify that the plans meet the codes, and we would have to issue the building permit, regardless of whether we agree or not. That doesn't mean they can build it in violation of the code, but it allows us much less time to review plans, makes it harder to be thorough, and particularly in the times when we have a large volume coming in, it may be very hard to meet these deadlines. And again, if we miss the deadlines, third-party reviewers who may not be as familiar with our own codes. So, it changes the whole metric of how we do it. It may impact for various municipalities their staffing levels of hiring more people to review plans to meet these deadlines. But this may have an impact on our ability to review plans if adopted. So those are the 6 big areas of the legislation. There's a lot of debate going on, and I've heard this from so many different people. Oh, it's not going to pass in its present form. Or, I don't think it's going to pass at all. I can't imagine. Or, I think this is great. I hope it does pass. All people have different opinions. And one of the things I can tell you about Springfield, when I've been watching it for years, is it's sometimes very hard to predict. So I don't know if it will be in this form. I don't know if it'll be in this form, but they may change 8 units to 4. I don't know if some of this legislation gets adopted and whole parts of this fall by the wayside. It's very hard to predict, but certainly if it's adopted in its present form, would have a large impact on the village, and that's why we wanted to bring it to your attention.
Thank you, Attorney Schuster. I think it was very, very informative. What I'd like to do is see if any trustees have questions, comments, thoughts that they want to say now and bounce off Ben. Maybe stand up there, Ben. Once everybody's done with that, I would like, and could go around and poll whether the individual trustee is in favor of the build bill, against the build bill, or neutral/undecided on the build bill, so we have an idea of where the board stands. Comments first.
So as I go through this, and I've looked up 3 different properties in LaGrange. One could have 4, one could have 8, one could have 16 townhomes put in. What in that regulation rule said that something needs to be affordable in that building? Or can I just come in, build 4 townhomes and sell them for $1 million a piece and triple my money?
So the legislation isn't really focused on addressing affordability through mandates of rents or purchase price. Instead, it tries to address the issue through a supply problem, based on the assertion that there's a huge housing shortage. If we create more supply, housing prices will fall, and it will be more affordable. As well as part of the affordability issue for people is if you don't want a single-family home, you want to downsize inventory. So the idea is also allowing different size and types of units to be created. But it's not about mandating, that X percentage have to be reserved for those who have an income of a certain level. That's not what the legislation is focused on currently.
Trustee Augustine, any general comments?
Yeah, and then we'll have another comment time before when we talk about our votes.
Yeah, right, before we just poll if you're favor, against, or neutral, or undecided. So yes, I'll
yes.
just general comments, questions.
So yeah, just general comments, and also this will address something that one of our residents, Mr. Robinson, asked about or commented about earlier. On this agenda tonight, originally, it was proposed that we vote on the language and officially forming an affordable housing task force or commission or advisory group of some sort. The draft language was presented to the board a few days ago last week. I saw it. I didn't think it was ready yet. And I asked that it be removed from the agenda until we had time to rewrite that. And President Kukler said that was fine. I don't think any of us want to rush that. At the same time, I did know that on this agenda, we'd be hearing from you tonight to talk about build, which is great because that's something I asked about several meetings ago, and we all need to understand that, and our residents really need to understand what this means, understand how it impacts us, and also some of the inherent value in it. What I didn't expect tonight was the resolution that we'll discuss later, which is for us to potentially vote in support of the IML's municipal resolution. So, and I can talk about that a little bit later, but I'm concerned, for me personally, having just seen this on the agenda when it came out Thursday night, and actually I didn't get a chance to look at it until Friday morning. I didn't know it was coming. So I'm not done reading up on build. I still have a lot of questions about what build does and about the other legislation at the federal level that's associated with it. When we were talking about the housing group, we were talking about bringing in experts to talk about build, potentially bringing in some of our local state legislators to talk about it from their perspective, because it sounds like most of them are in support of it. So I thought it'd be great to hear from the officials who will be voting on it in Springfield. That kind of information I think is going to really be helpful for us as a board and for our community to understand, and I'm hoping that we can still do that. But that just kind of addresses what Mr. Robinson was asking about, why that's not on the agenda tonight. And I'm hoping that, again, I just haven't had time to read through the IML's support or their resolution to not support the bill as put forth. I just need to do a lot more work on that, and I would imagine that many of us would. Getting something late Thursday night, going into weekend, having things to do with your kids, sometimes it's not enough to read through these multiple 100-page agendas, and I'd like to be thorough. I think this is important, and I'm not prepared to make a vote on supporting or not supporting that tonight, and I would like to hear from our state officials on it.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Any general comments done on this end on the build bill, or questions for Attorney Schuster?
Right now, what I'm hearing is pretty restrictive, and I am concerned about this is a built-out community, whereas some of the exurbs, I guess is the terminology, have the ability to get larger. LaGrange does not. LaGrange really doesn't have that, and so I find what I'm hearing is rather restrictive. But I also share Trustee Augustine's thoughts about I'm not prepared to vote on this at this time. I would like to have the opportunity to read more, but I have to honestly say I'm leaning in support, but I want more time to review it.
Thank you, Trustee Peterson. Any other comments? You might as well just start down there saying on the poll, either you're in favor, against, or undecided. And then we'll go down to this end. Trustee Augustine's already said, I think undecided is how you would categorize her. And I would say you said, Trustee Peterson, you're undecided.
Undecided.
I'll just chime in and say, yeah, I'm similarly undecided. I mean, while I read this ordinance and it's, it's simply, I look at it as this is part of a negotiation we're having with the state, where we're trying to preserve our land use authority. I would still like some more time to noodle on this as well.
Yeah, I don't think we're in a negotiation with the state.
No, I mean, it's us saying what our position is, and then the state saying what they're going to do to us.
Okay. We have 3 out of the 5 trustees who've already said that they're undecided, would want to wait. So the other 2 don't have to say anything or have the opportunity to say anything.
Well, I just think that, and I know we're looking at doing affordable housing. This bill takes away the rights of a local community and does nothing to create affordable housing. And let me give you an example of that. And I have nothing against it, but Reardon Legacy Builders in this town buys normally the lots that were the ranches that were turned sideways, so they took up 2 lots, and he builds 2 mega mansions there, and he sells them for double the price of the lot. Now he can come in, and I referenced the townhomes that are right beside the tennis courts in Western Springs on Ogden Avenue. Now he can come in and buy those same lots and put up 4 townhomes and sell them for $1 million a piece. Well, for example, just selfishly, my house, I looked up the rules. I can build 4 to 6 townhomes on my property. I guarantee I can get a builder to come in and sell those all for $1 million. It'll drive my property value up, and I'll make more money selling my house for land value than I will selling it as a historical home. And that's what worries me about this legislation, that it just destroys the character of LaGrange, because now there's no incentive to keep your historical home if you're on a big lot or a double lot, because you can tear it down and build these massive things, because in this bill, it does not do anything for affordable housing. So therefore, I support the proposal, because I think we do need to negotiate with Springfield and tell them that we're not happy with it.
And I would just echo, obviously, I'm with you on that, but I echo that these lots can be subdivided, and even more than if you didn't subdivide. It's the numbers can, as the bill is currently drafted, the numbers can get pretty astronomical on what you could theoretically put on a lot. But I understand the trustees that want to study it longer. And Trustee O'Brien, do you have anything to say, or just?
I would be in support of the resolution, but.
Okay. So we have 2 in support of the resolution that could vote. I don't vote unless it's a tie. We have 3 that want to study it longer, and Trustee McGee isn't with us. So we don't know where she would have gone on that. I guess it will table that if the 3 trustees that are in favor of studying it longer have completed their study and want to share with the board what they are, then we know to bring it back up. If we don't hear from them, we'll understand that they either aren't in favor of following the Illinois Municipal League or haven't come to a conclusion yet.
President Kugler, if I may just say a couple more things. I don't have enough experience on this topic to just study it and come to a clear answer. I was hoping we could ask some of our elected officials to maybe come to our next meeting.
Who do you suggest?
Well, we've got who go down to Springfield. We've still Kim Lightford, John Curry, Abdel Nasser Rashid, and Chantel Franklin. Because these are the people who are in support of the bill. I think maybe some of them, not all of them. I think at least Chantel Franklin. No. I don't know. I'd love to hear.
I talked to her today on it, and she was non-committal.
Okay.
She's a real estate agent, and the real estate agents are backing it hard. But she won't be voting on it. I don't think. She doesn't come into office until November, and the bill is going to be going probably before the legislature by the end of May.
Yeah, and I understand that the IML document will create, a force that would, hopefully cause them to look at some of the issues. But I think that towns like LaGrange, and there are many, I think, that would have the similar concerns that many of us have expressed. I'd like to be maybe a little bit specific, and I understand from Attorney Schuster that some towns have both supported this resolution while also sending their own separate line of language to say, this we're kind of okay here, we're not okay here, so that we can give them some guidance versus just wholesale saying no. So that it's just that kind of thing. But if there is, if we can reach out to our officials, if anyone supports it and they want to come speak with us, I think that would be valuable for the community. Maybe give us some perspective on it. I know we know our town, and I know we know what we want to do and maybe don't want to do, but I think it's important to just have that material.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak to any of the elected officials, but I will say if we can get them to come to a meeting, I hope we're talking about flood relief.
I think both things are important. This is massive. If it passes, it would be nice to know that they've heard from us and we've heard from them. I think if they're not being asked of every community to come through, I wouldn't be surprised. But if we ask, we've had them show up before. So it's just a thought to help us all understand it. But I'm definitely not ready to vote tonight. But there are certainly, as there were last time I heard about it, some things that do concern me.
Thank you. All right, I don't think we need any further activity tonight on D, which brings us to the close of current business, which means we are now at public comments on matters not on tonight's agenda, and we're at 9:05, and we're going into closed session, so we will have to keep you to 3 minutes. We invite you to come back in 2 weeks and continue on.
Good evening, President and Board of Trustees. My name is John Puto, a resident of LaGrange. I am returning tonight because the gravity of the 2025 audit report requires more than a single conversation. While the village has acknowledged these failures, the community is still waiting to see if transparency will be followed by transformation. To recap findings, this was from the auditor's report, 2025 001. The auditors didn't find just a minor typo, they uncovered a material weakness. For the public's benefit, that means our internal financial safeguards failed at the highest level. The fact that the outside auditors had to step in to manually adjust entries of our debt and capital assets proves that our internal ledger was essentially a work of fiction until the professionals corrected it. We cannot manage a village budget based on estimates that require an emergency rescue during an audit. If our internal data isn't reliable, our fiscal planning isn't either. Systematic neglect and grant risk, moving to significant deficiencies. Finding 2025-002 regarding bank reconciliations is particularly frustrating. It's been established that the village is falling behind on balancing its accounts. This isn't just paperwork. It's a wide open door for undetected errors and worse. Even more alarming is findings 2025-004, the commingling of grant funds and the loss of supporting documentation isn't just messy bookkeeping. It's an official non-compliance. We are essentially gambling with our future eligibility for state and federal grants. We cannot lose out on our external fundings because we fail to keep the receipts for the money we have already received. We need to ask for accountability. At the last meeting, management agreed with these findings, but the agreement is passive. The residents of LaGrange need action. Where is the corrective action plan? Has the 30-day reconciliation deadline been met this month? What specific physical or digital safeguards have been installed to separate grant documentation? We are looking for a timeline, not a handshake. I look forward to a formal update of these specific remediations so that the material weaknesses of the 2025 do not appear in the 2026. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Al Foreman, 7th Avenue. I'm here to continue shining a spotlight on your financial house. In addition to the auditor's findings, I have my own personal observations. They include questionable decision-making by both village management and the board, which resulted in an understaffed finance department, ineffective supervision, and a delinquent audit report. Your silence on the matter was also a questionable decision. I'll mention the treasurer's report again. It's a statutory requirement, not a discretionary one. I hold the board accountable for its timely publication. I submitted a FOIA request for recent bank reconciliations and statements. A delayed, yet to be received response is unacceptable. I'll remind you that itemized compensation reports for all employees is required. I expect it to appear in the village website. Now, please don't mistake silence from most residents for approval. Your stewardship, accountability, and credibility are on the line. That said, I call upon the board to require staff to provide monthly financial reports. Board agenda packages should include budget variances along with cash and investment balances. A quarterly presentation by the finance director would be good. Now, these are not radical thoughts. Just look at pages 25 and 26 in your budget document. Now, I'll also call upon the board to verify all audit findings from last year have been remediated. Disclose any fines and additional fees arising from the delinquent audit, and publish a transparent timeline and status reports for the audit of this fiscal year. All of you must increase your focus on improving financial oversight. Assigning one trustee as financial liaison is insufficient. You need to enhance financial reviews and demand timely information. Please prioritize a cost-benefit analysis of outsourcing financing functions, especially before spending $350,000 on new software. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comments, I would open it up to trustee comments before we move into closed session. Trustee Thompson.
Thank you, President Kukler. This past Tuesday, Trustee Peterson and I were able to attend the active shooter training that occurred at St. Cletus School. I would like to personally thank Sergeant Mike Kaiser of the Police Department in coordination with Captain James Baum and Lieutenant Reed Selvik of the Fire Department for the great job that they put on coordinating that. I also would like to thank Mr. Greg Porad, the principal, and Ms. Christy Schaefer, the assistant principal of St. Cletus School, for their great help in getting this done. Also, in addition to Grange, Western Springs, Hodgkins, Countryside, Hinsdale, Brookfield, and I'm probably missing some communities, but there were so many communities. Also, the LaGrange Hospital. A little bit, we know LaGrange, we sent, I think, 6 victims to the hospital that day. The hospital on their own sent 13 or 14 walk-in people that had left the school injured or shot to really enhance the activities of training going on. There was a lot of things that I think the police department learned, the fire department learned on how we handle these things. I think as a village, God forbid one of these ever happens, but we need to be very prepared for the influx of people, the amount of traffic that will come in, and how we deal with the distraught parents. And, you know, as LTAC said, they only had 3 calls that went on during that training time. Imagine how many calls LTAC will get in a real situation. So we really do need to prepare. Hopefully it never happens at our schools, but it was a great program, and I appreciate both chiefs and letting their departments participate that and lead it. And I'm glad to also see that there are going to be continued more of these trainings that are going to go on around. I think Western Springs is doing the Ideal School coming up in another month. So again, thank you very much for your support on that and appreciate y'all getting that done.
Thank you, Trustee Thompson. And I know Trustee Peterson wanted to echo on that since she also, as you mentioned, was there.
I do. I echo what Trustee Thompson said. I had the opportunity to observe the live shooter training, and it did take place at St. Cletus School, and the training involved LaGrange and other municipalities, so that was impressive, and it was led by our LaGrange Police Department under Chief Griffin, and I also want to thank Sergeant Mike Kaiser. It was extraordinarily well organized. It was executed very, very well. And I do want to say that we are very fortunate to have such professional and highly trained first responders, police, fire, and dispatchers working for the Village of LaGrange. It was very impressive. Thanks to both of you, Fire Breda and Police Chief Griffin. Please extend my thanks and the thanks of the board to your staff.
Thank you, Trustee Peterson. Any other trustee comments? Before we go into closed session, I want to say our next village board meeting is in 2 weeks on April 27th. I am planning to have a coffee with the president on Saturday, April 25th in this room at 9 a.m., 9 to 10:30. It will be informal. We may have somebody from the police department come and talk to us about as we're moving from spring to summer, things to be careful of, and it'll be an opportunity where you can talk without being limited to 3 minutes. So I hope everybody comes out. And with that, we will talk about closed session now. At this time, the village board intends to meet in closed session under Section 2C11 for the purposes of discussing pending or probable litigation of the Illinois Open Meetings Act. Okay, let me start over again. At this time, the village board intends to meet in closed session under Section 2C11 for the purpose of discussing pending or probable litigation. The village board will not reconvene in open session as no formal action will occur following the closed session. May I have a motion to enter into closed session?
I move we enter into closed session.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Thompson and Trustee Gale. I'd ask for a roll call vote on going into closed session.
Trustee Augustine?
Aye.
Trustee Peterson?
Aye.
Trustee Thompson?
Aye.
Trustee O'Brien?
Aye.
Trustee Gale?
Aye.
Right? No? Okay. So into closed session. We cheer.
Doesn't want to go to sleep. She's